idea that we control the dragons is an illusion. They are a power man should never have trifled with.
I love dragons, and you probably do too. And I've loved them since the days of Dragon Tales, and up through Dragon Wars, Dragon Booster, Lair, The Goblet of Fire, American Dragon Jake Long, Aragon, Skyrim, The Destination of Smaug, and so many others. Dragons were the excuse for me writing an entire book. So it's needless to say that I've been smitten by the dragons in Game of Thrones and its sequel, House of the Dragon. But my other unhealthy obsession is writing and editing, and with House of the Dragon Season 1 now finished, I couldn't help but absolutely marvel at Episode 10. As a lover of dragons and the narratives they are used in, the season finale was everything that I was looking for from the show. It was the climax of not only our character conflicts, but a showcase of the significance of dragons and the weight of the changes they could bring about in the story. But what intrigued me the most was how the season's underlying themes and messages came full circle in the finale, and how the dragons exemplify far more than fire-breathing lizards, but the embodiments of prideful carelessness and the consequences of war.
War is so central to fantasy. So much of high fantasy, and yet it's these bloodless wars where the heroes are killing unending armies of orcs, and the heroes themselves are not themselves ever being killed. I think if you're going to write about war and violence, then show the cost, show how ugly it is, show both sides of it. There's also, and on the other side, which sometimes gets me in trouble from the other side of the political spectrum, is the glory of war, which those of us who are opposed to war and would rather not have war tend to forget about or try to pretend it doesn't exist. But the knights would come out in colors. They were the only people rich enough to afford dyed clothing, and they'd be in their blues and their crimsons and their yellows. They must have seemed glorious to the peasants who were coming in their metal suits and going into combat. But then there would be like severed limbs everywhere and pools of blood. You read descriptions of the Hastings battlefield after the Battle of Hastings were fought, and yeah, there literally were like streams of blood and giant pools of blood. There's a lot of blood in a human being, and when you're fighting with these sharp swords and hacking off limbs and hacking people in the middle of the head, it's not a bloodless exercise. And I think if you're going to write about that period, then you should reflect honestly what it's about.
Dragons are treated differently in both Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon when compared to other similar fictions, and much of that has to do with creating exaggerations and allegories for war and conflict. This type of narrative depiction may seem very basic, but it actually runs against much of what storytelling has made us accustomed to over the decades. With respect to the possibility of oversimplifying things, fictions usually depict dragons in one of two ways, each with particular narrative functions. The first we can call the natural dragons. Famous depictions of this archetype can be recognized in Harry Potter, Peach Dragon, and How to Train Your Dragon. Dragons in this category are depicted as having explicitly animalistic and instinctual tendencies. They show food or territorial aggression, or perhaps yearn for comfort like a social animal would. But no matter the specific expression, the dragons of the animal paradigm are not supposed to be human-like. They don't speak or express the logical reasoning of mankind. These dragons are meant to feel natural, like a part of the ecosystem and an extension of the world as any other animal might be. The narrative benefit of this paradigm is that these dragons can feel the most real or plausible because they exhibit traits that mimic real animals. The Hungarian horntail trial in Harry Potter was so suspenseful because Harry could not reason with the beast in the same way he couldn't reason with an angry mountain lion. Narratives with natural or animalistic dragons at their center usually wish to make a commentary about the unity that man can have with nature, or the dominance that man can have over nature's even most incredible creation once he understands its danger and knows how to overcome it.
That's right. You're mine.
On the flip side, we have the supernatural dragons. These dragons are depicted as explicitly above nature, usually having origins that are overtly spiritual, plainly divine, or created from a divine being. Famous depictions of these are the Skyrim dragons, who are children of the god Akatosh, or Lord of the Rings dragons and worms, first created by Morgoth. These dragons can usually speak and have intelligence on par or far exceeding that of humans. From a narrative perspective, this is so that the concept of the supernatural can comment on its own grandeur and make clear the difference between it and mankind.
I am fire. I am death.
And dragons in this paradigm usually exist in some way that has massive implications for the world at large. From a narrative perspective, supernatural dragons are usually meant to represent the power that man cannot naturally attain. They are meant to represent man's own minuscule stature in the face of the vastness of existence.
But the thing they do best is beg for mercy.
And in many cases, they are meant to showcase the dangers of man abusing such powers if man were to attain them. Whatever the case may be, supernatural dragons show the feebleness of mankind and demonstrate that there are some aspects of reality that man cannot or should not trifle with. And even though these are the two major narrative archetypes that dragons fall into, there is a subtype that is important to understand: the weapon dragons. These are the dragons that have been mastered by humans or partnered with humans because of a mutual benefit. Dragons in this situation usually have no conflict of their own, but are used as tools in human conflict. But the major distinction about this subtype is that these dragons are almost always natural dragons, or the animalistic dragons. Again, since narratives depicting natural dragons are largely meant to explore how man can bond with or dominate nature, showing dragons as tools for mankind fits in smoothly. Conversely, this stands in opposition to supernatural dragons, who are so far above man in both intellect and power that they don't bother themselves with fixing the conflicts of man. Instead, supernatural dragons will often be the ones in conflict with man, or have conflict with another supernatural group, or even other dragons themselves. And just to be clear, it's not like dragons have some innate monopoly on these types of narratives. Any fictional creature could be substituted in and the paradigm would remain, but dragons have just appeared so frequently and for so long in our stories that a natural formula has arisen surrounding their inclusion. Still, the reason that I detail these aspects at all is so that we may understand how House of the Dragon is innovating on the long-standing traditions and cliches of dragon narratives. Where so many other stories have natural dragons, supernatural dragons, or dragons as weapons, the dragons of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon are all three. And it is this narrative intersectionality that creates an alluring situation that many fictions have not come close to matching. For the sake of simplicity and brevity, all dragons from Game of Thrones and House of the Dragons will be called the show dragons from now on. Now, let's take a look at how they fit all three categories. First off, the show sets the stage very well for our understanding of the dragons as natural or animalistic. We see them being born, we see them eating food, we see their need for social connectivity. The dragons do not speak or intuit language with their riders. Their bond is that of trust between an apex predator and a cautious handler. And there is no shyness about showing them as predators. We've seen dragons hunt for food, create nests, display food aggression, and become feral with their caretakers. Much like the Hungarian Horntail trial, it's Drogon's bestial, animalistic nature that creates such awe and terror. He doesn't have a battle plan or a strategy, or empathy, or an agenda. He is an angry behemoth filled with kerosene that is engulfed in a rage so primal that he almost doesn't recognize his mother. And it's the fact that this unbridled ferocity sits just on the other side of this calm, stoic creature that makes the dragons feel real and natural. Yet at the same time, it's clear for us viewers that the show dragons are not of the natural world. They are not simply animals. They are distinctly supernatural. They grow endlessly and inexplicably breathe fire. Melisandre calls them fire-made flesh, and though they never speak, Tyrion says scholars report dragons to be as smart as men, if not smarter. And most prominent of all, the show dragons have a psychic connection with their riders, such as feeling their danger or feeling their pain. For Thrones and House, the dragons are the most consistent representation of divine magic, and nothing else in the world rivals them. Vhagar is tantamount to a Lovecraftian cosmic horror, so large and mighty that it boggles perception. Daemon approaches Vermithor on an altar, singing Valyrian hymns like a priest awakening an elder god. And Valyrian's skull is literally mounted on a shrine and beheld like a deific relic. But finally, and most interestingly, the natural and supernatural elements of the show dragons combine and transform as the dragons fulfill the third paradigm: weapons. These beasts, these gods, are mastered and commanded by men and children. They obey the wills of the meager, weak, and dying. The dragons have no conflicts or concerns of their own. Everything they do is in service to their masters. And it's because of these animalistic gods that serve humans that we get an enrapturing, unique narrative take on war and power for a medieval setting. If we think of natural dragons used as weapons, they might be synonymous with humans crafting natural materials into swords and bows and shields and castles, because ultimately our mastery of these things allows us control over and unity with nature.
You belong to me now.
If we stick with the same analogy, supernatural dragons represent the aspects of existential power that man cannot control, such as hurricanes, meteor strikes, and supernovas.
My wings are a hurricane!
Destructive powers that change whole ecosystems and landscapes. And usually, narratives depict these supernatural entities as smart enough to tell us that they should not be controlled.
With my torment.
But in the rare cases when supernatural dragons are used as weapons by man, their intelligence allows them to give us guidance in their proper use and how to cope with their terrible power.
You will never win until Einar's evil is destroyed, and to do that you must destroy me.
But what happens when you have a supernatural dragon controlled by man that cannot give guidance on how to use its power? What happens when man is left to choose for himself what to do with otherworldly destructive might? Well, you get the show dragons. You get godly beings who have no interest in guiding the morality of man. You get a situation where a person can use their power for whatever they want, along with the consequences that come with it. It is scarily accurate to analogize the show dragons as nuclear armaments, because the power they allow is far beyond anything that man should wield, and rather than them being our tools, we must adapt to them out of the fear of their existence. And this is what is so unique about the weaponhood of the show dragons. Where other fictions allow their supernatural dragons to come with a moral compass or be reasoned with, the show dragons are silent and ambiguous. They are just like nukes, because nukes don't tell you where to drop them, you decide that on your own. And just like a nuke, the use of a dragon comes with consequences. The look on Aemon's face wasn't just because Vhagar killed Luke. It's because Aemon realized that at the end of the day, he actually has no real way of managing Vhagar's power. His control was an illusion. He treated the dragon like an animalistic pet to have fun with, but now realizes that it's a god that can do as it pleases. If Vhagar or any other dragon so wanted to immolate whole cities or countries, there is nothing anyone could do about it. And the other half of the terrifying equation is a human one. Mankind has become accustomed and addicted to the thrill of wielding such unstable power, even to our own detriment. It is no accident that we have now seen 3 instances of Targaryens on Dragonback remorselessly slaughtering the innocents beneath them, either by choice or by accident. Because that's kind of the point. The point being to show that mirror side that George was talking about concerning the horrors of war. The side of war that is glorified by the people who wield the power. When the Targaryens are above their dragons, they feel like they are above gods themselves. Yet when they stand on their own 2 feet before a dragon, they are completely helpless and reverent. The dragons work to highlight what George R. R. Martin thinks all stories come down to: the human heart in conflict with itself.
You know, William Faulkner, in his Nobel Prize acceptance speech, said the only thing worth writing about is the human heart in conflict with itself. And I've always believed that to be true.
Those that command dragons in the show, who believe themselves to be masters of a godlike force, act as if they're above the rest.
Who gives a fuck what some lord thinks? You are the dragon. Your word is truth.
They do as they please without thought of consequence or cost because they feel at one with the divine supremacy that dragons allow. They can inspire love through fear or cause fear with their love, for all their sins will be washed away in dragon fire along with those that oppose them. But the ultimate cost of all this, and the true fuel for excitement for rewatchers, is that this false belief of control of naturally divine weapons will only push the characters further and further until we don't recognize them anymore. Draconic escalation from one side will only cause draconic escalation from the other, because each side feels that they have no choice but to match the terrible power that the other wields. The only hope for true peace is the disarmament of the dragons, but because of the dragons' animalistic nature, the Targaryens have this persisting belief that they are meant to control them as weapons, but as we've seen, there is no control.
Dragons, Khaleesi. They would never be tamed. Not even by their mother.
The characters that we have watched so far are trapped by the dragons that they have based their rule on. Their power, along with their identity, is wrapped up in using the dragons as the weapons they never should have been. And as horrific as it is for those characters to live through, it will surely be top-tier television for us to watch. Anyway, thanks for watching all the way until the end. If you like what you heard, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to be a real homie, check out the Patreon and support. Also check out my website for editing services and my books. As always, it was a pleasure, and I will talk to you all again soon.